A very good afternoon. Thank you very much for being here. Today is the third session for the Author Talks series for the anthology, The Stained Glass Window. And today's topic is poetry and storytelling during the pandemic. I have a glorious selection of authors from the anthology. We have Mehwish Amin, Ifat Said, Ilona Yusuf, and also Naveed Shehzad, who's just facing some technical difficulties, and I'm sure she'll be back here within a few minutes. I'm going to start off with Mehwish Amin. How are you, Mehwish? Thank you very much for being
I'm
here.
fine. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you very much. So I'm going to start off with the usual question: how's the pandemic treated the editor slash writer slash poet in you? How's it been? The lockdowns and
Well,
everything?
it's treated me like it's treated everybody else. It's been very democratic that way. And we've all, I think, gone through the phases of, a little bit of disbelief when it actually became a pandemic, and then getting about to regulate our lives accordingly. This sudden sort of lack of communication with everybody and everything. But I was just thinking that people like myself, who's an editor and a publisher and a poet, it's been easier because one can still work via internet, and it's not the kind of job where anyway we were going every day to an office. We were basically getting together over the phone, over WhatsApp, over the internet, and occasional meetings, of course, and those were totally shut off in the beginning. And that I think all of us also have this normal human reflex. We want to, even the people that we are working with, we do want to meet them occasionally, and that kind of thing. So initially it was very strange, but we were dealing with so much else in our minds. I mean, is it going to get us? Is it going to what's going to happen? It was becoming worse everywhere. And so slowly you get used to everything. I mean, and so we slowly I've acclimatized to it. I just sort of wear my mask everywhere I go. Yesterday I had a couple of people over, and really fought hard the natural tendency to give a peck on the cheek. And so otherwise life goes on, I think, as always.
That's right.
That's great. Thank you very much, Mavish. Tell us what have you been up to as I mean, that's how you've how the pandemic has treated you and how you've treated it. That's very encouraging to hear. But just tell us the journey of reading, writing, editing, publishing through the lockdown. How's that been going with that literary journal, the Aleph Review? What's kept you
Yeah,
busy? Let's
yeah.
hear from you.
Well, we were, we just finished with our fourth anthology, and we were, in fact, there was a session at the LLF, and right after that, we normally have a launch of our own, and we couldn't do it because then all of a sudden the pandemic was all around us, and we were all instructed to stay indoors and not have any activities at all. So we myself, Ilona, who's an associate editor, the other two editors, Afshan and Hassan, we all decided to go ahead of as always, as every year. And as I said, it was lucky that we can do this via the internet. I mean, there was no hitch or glitch there, and went on doing that. But strangely enough, it was the ideal time to read a lot of books, but I didn't read for some odd reason. I was more caught up with the journal, with writing. I wrote a lot, including the poem that I wrote for you, and I wrote a lot of things, and I'm trying to get it collected for an anthology to publish it together. So that's what I've been involved in. And also this time we've had an really unusual lot of activity on our on Aleph. on the last day of submissions, we had about 100 contributors. I mean, just on the last day. So just sifting through them, going through them, you know, sending off the poems to Ilona, who basically takes care of the poetry side of it, and so much prose. And then after that, after we had chosen the prose, with great difficulty, because there were lots of great things in it, and to confine it to a certain number, and then to find art which kind of accompanied the you know, the pieces. It's I've been very busy, and I've really enjoyed it. Also, I've been learning Spanish online, so that's another activity that keeps me really kind of happy and busy. And otherwise just been home basically, except mostly, I mean, you know. And but the thing of reading online goes on. The thing of we have a website as well, so choosing every week for stuff for the website, finding artwork for it, it just keeps you swimmingly busy. So I've been very busy.
That's great. Lovely. I think that's the best way to, keep gliding through it, to keep busy. Mevish, I have this question. You just mentioned you have been writing a lot of things, and you need to put them into an anthology. So what are those things? Are they all poetry pieces or fiction or what?
Well, I had, Sana, strangely enough, I've written a lot of fiction beforehand, and now these last few months I've been writing a lot of poetry, and some of it has to do with the pandemic, some of it has to do with other things. All I want to do is some of my older pieces and the newer ones. In fact, Nivi told me that I should collect them and publish them. So I'm thinking very seriously of doing it, and she offered very sweetly to do a forward for me. So I'm thinking very seriously of collecting everything which I have to some extent, and so that takes a lot of time, and things are mostly poetry this lately.
Excellent. Mavish, I remember when I asked you to write something for me, you were very kind. You said, yes, I think I'm going to, but you kept it very open-ended. I thought, you'll just go around fiction, since that was the request. But then when, the poem came to me, it was very delightful. It was very engaging, and I loved having it. Could you tell me what made you write that poem? Did you intentionally,
Yeah. It was actually, Sana, it was maybe a little bit of miscommunication also, because I thought it could be either poetry or prose. So
I like this kind of miscommunication. I'm so glad you did.
So anyway,
okay, please go on.
What happened was, I'll tell you what brought the poem about. I was swimming one day. It was in the summer, and then I had a kind of well, what's the opposite of an epiphany? If it's a bit fearful, I mean, there was this. I kind of saw this bristling protein, blue and red, kind of going through the Mayshine, coming through the Mayshine, and attacking me. I mean, like the COVID attacking me. And I just had a brief moment of panic, which I haven't succumbed to since or before. And I said, oh my God, I mean, if this thing attacks me, I'm not willing to go out that way. So I just thought, and then after that little brief moment of panic, I thought to myself, and I just wrote this poem, and I thought to myself, obviously we can't choose our deaths, but one can write about it. So that's what brought this poem about. And the other bit, that it wasn't, I mean, next time I'm going to keep the channels clear. I thought it could be poetry or fiction. And thank you so much for putting it right at the beginning of the book. I'm delighted to see it.
Oh, thank you very much for sending it in. I'm so glad. This is the first time that any miscommunication has brought poetry to me, and I'm so happy to have it. It was amazing to read it, very sensitively written, very descriptive. It's full of imagination. It's full of psychoanalysis, might I say. Mavish, would you like to read a chunk of your poetry? We don't want to give it all away, but I definitely would like you to read a small portion of it.
Sure, I'll read a tiny bit of it, because
Yes,
it's true COVID-19, but not really. I mean, what I'm trying to tell COVID-19 is the title of the poem is "The Deaths I Do and Don't Want," and so I'm going to start with the beginning and just a couple of paras. The fabric of these days is run through with death. I do not want this sly droplet to insinuate itself into the cells that make me, duping them into turning traitor. Surely my mind can dictate. You are mine. Don't surrender. Don't surrender. But we know will is just a word made impotent by the cannibalizing ferocity of this virus. It does not allow other inventions, other ballads of power. So that's the beginning.
Lovely.
And then I go on to imagine the different deaths that I would like for myself, if there was any such thing. And it goes on like that.
It was very deep. It's a lovely, lovely poem. And I'm very glad that we had it so that we could just open the book with it. Thank you very much. So I think we have Naveed Shehzad, we have her. All right, thank you very much.
Hello.
I wish I'll come back to you. Yes. Hello, welcome.
Thank you.
How are you? Well, great.
I'm
Great
very
to have
well.
you.
Good to see all you ladies there. Sorry?
Yeah, I'm just welcoming you. I'm very glad to have you here. I think we're just going to start off. We had Meva Shreed from her poem just now, and we have, for all those, I mean, definitely, you know, Naveed Shehzad, she needs no formal introduction. None of these ladies do who are here, but I'm just going to read out a brief introduction, just in case. Naveed Shehzad is a celebrated academic associated with literature in English and the liberal and performing arts since the beginning of her career. As a professor at the University of the Punjab, being the first Pakistani to be awarded a first-class first in the MA English Literature program, she was awarded the Diamond Jubilee Purse. As academic advisor to one of the country's largest school chains, Ms. Shehzad is an acknowledged authority on media studies and literature. Her latest venture is a book, Aslan's Roar, Turkish Television and the Rise of the Muslim Hero. Of course, there are a lot of things that, you know, a lot more accomplishments of this lovely lady. I'll just go ahead and ask you, Nivi, since you have graciously allowed me to call you Nivi, how's the pandemic treated you? What have you been through? You know, what have you been doing through it and to cope with it? The lockdowns and everything? Let's hear it from you.
Sana, obviously it's been a very strange year for everybody. And I'm no exception to that. Having said that, however, it's given me a lot of time to be with myself, which I think is very unusual because, you know, life doesn't allow you to sit with yourself for very long. You can only do it in short spurts and so on. And that way I feel fortunate. Of course, I'm very sorry to hear about people suffering and people passing away and so on. It's been a very difficult time for the entire world. Personally, it's given me a lot of time to do some thinking and writing and researching. So that way, I would say it's been a very fortunate time for me.
What have you been reading? Let's, you know, are there any books that you'd like to mention? What have you been reading or writing?
Well, I'll share some good news with all of you. I've just received a commission to write something for an international publication, and that's what I'm working on. It's my first piece on fairs and the Turkish poet Nazim Hikmat, and it's to do with the poet in exile. So I'm talking about exile poetry, looking at it in a broad perspective and then narrowing it down to these two giants of the 20th century. So I'm really having a ball with that.
Excellent. Excellent. Congratulations for the project and all the best. Best of luck. Nivi, can you please take us down the path of writing this short fiction that you have very kindly contributed to the anthology? I would like to know what made you write this, what kind of mood you were in. You know, please, it's a beautiful story, lovely story. Just take us through the process.
Sana, first off, I'd like to thank you and your colleagues and Liberty Books for this lovely publication. I think it's going to go places, and I hope this is the first of your ventures and that you will continue with this. I really think you're in a wonderful position, especially with Mavish there and Ilona, to start off a platform for women writing. I think it's just the right time to go into something like this, and I would love to be a modest part of something like that. But I think these two ladies really they need to take a lead on something like this. I'm very sorry that I haven't had time to read through everybody's work. I would have loved to. Mavish's poem I was already familiar with, and I'm trying to arm twist her into doing an anthology of her work, because I think she's one of the best poets I've read in recent years. And I'm not just talking about Pakistani poets, I'm talking about the poet. And I think it would be a shame if she didn't share the rest of her work with us. Coming back to how and why I wrote this particular story, I have been struck by the fact that the one thread that ties all of us together during these very strange times has been loneliness.
Yeah.
And being on your own, particularly people who don't have a family. And I just thought of this woman who had obviously not had a relationship with anybody for the longest period of time, let alone a man. And she had created for herself a private universe in which she looked forward to the man coming home. She makes him a living entity, whereas there's nobody like that. But that's what keeps all the demons of loneliness away. Eventually, of course, as if you read the story, you will find that she dies alone, and for many days nobody discovers that she's dead, which has happened to quite a few people. And I just wanted to highlight what loneliness can do to you. And I thought it was something that we needed to address, looking around us and seeing lonely people. You can be lonely in a crowd, certainly, but I think loneliness is one of the greatest dilemmas of the 21st century. So I thought I'd address that particular issue.
That's wonderful. But Nivi, I think the woman seems to be quite at peace with her loneliness or isolation. Was that also the point? Was that the point? I'd like to elaborate on that.
That was deliberate. You see, people create worlds for themselves in which they create their own comfort level. They spin stories around themselves that they actually start to believe. And it becomes so real to them that they don't need anybody else. So it's exclusive to them and inclusive of all the people that they have dreamt up. It's a false world, yes, certainly, but some people seem to find that that's the only thing that gets them through life. It's unfortunate, but true in many cases.
Yeah, but then there's this conjuring up, yes? Even if they're comfortable, there's always this conjuring up. That's what the character is doing, isn't she? She's conjuring up images.
I think her problem is, and of course there's a neurosis about this. You don't just create people out of the blue. There may have been someone she liked at some time because she buys garments of a particular size. It's not as though it's just random picking up one in a medium and one in a large or something. They're all for one specific person. What I'm trying to say is there may have been someone that she was attracted to, but never really spoke to or got into a relationship with or whatever. Or it may have been someone that she had a relationship with. I'm leaving that open-ended. Yes. It's entirely up to the reader to imagine whether the man is totally imaginary, or whether it is someone from her past, or whether there was such a man and she has imagined the rest of it. So that's open-ended.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Nivi, I remember when I reached out to you, I was very reluctant. You were very gracious to give me a promise about writing a story, and that really thrilled me. It still thrills me today. When I read it, it's one of the best superstar stories I have in the anthology. Thank you very much for that. I'd like to ask you if you frequently write fiction, or what kind of writing do you do? Apart from your books, what else do you write?
I write a lot of poetry.
Oh, lovely.
Yes, but I've moved. When I was much younger, I used to write a lot of poetry in English. And Tawfiq Rafat, the late poet, thought that my work was very promising, which I was really flattered by. But then I moved because I teach literature, and I've always been interested in comparative literature. And then I went into media studies and communication and so on.
Yeah.
It struck me that the best voice that a writer can write in is in their own language. Now, I'm not saying this as a cardinal rule for everybody, because the choice is always up to the writer. But I found that I needed to get back to my roots. So I started a different trajectory. I went into Urdu poetry first, and then I moved all the way across to Punjabi poetry. And I just feel that my Punjabi poetry is the best of the three languages that I write in. It's been very well received. I haven't printed it anywhere or published it, but wherever I go and I recite my Punjabi poetry, I always get greater appreciation than when I read out something that I've written in English or in Urdu for that matter. But then I'm talking of Punjabi audiences. So there may be a kind of inclination to like that particular language. But this is what I'm finding so interesting about the paper that I'm writing, because Faiz writes only in Urdu and Nazim writes only in Turkish. And there's a lovely incident that I came across where where Faiz spent an entire evening reciting his poetry in Urdu to Pablo Neruda. They were in some cafe in Paris. Yeah. Neruda did exactly the same. He was reciting poetry in his language. Now, there wasn't a translator around. They didn't seem uncomfortable with the idea of not being able to understand each other's language, and spent the whole evening just reciting their own poetry. So I think, like music, there's some idea, cadences, some rhythms that cut across this linguistic barrier that we have.
All right, Nivi, before you joined in, we had Mehwish speaking, and she told us that you have been you've been offering a lot of encouragement to her to get her poems published. So, and you also mentioned that you have been arm-twisting her a little, which is very interesting. What I need to ask is, since you write poetry, why haven't you published your poetry? And after that, I'd also ask you to please recite something from your Punjabi poetry. Could you?
I'm sorry. I wish you had told me. I would have prepared myself for that. But at the moment, my poems are lying with a publisher, and I'm the kind of person who can never remember my own poetry, so I can't recite anything from memory for you.
This is a moment of discovery for me, is that you write Punjabi poetry, so that's why I couldn't really contain myself, and I have to ask you if you remember anything. If not, that's fine.
I think that I remember one short poem, if you'd like to hear it. माए मेरिए खेती च सरियों पीली होई पर माए मेरिए मैं हरी ना होई. It's part of a much longer poem where it's girls who get married off very early, and there's always the mother figure somewhere where she's always talking to the mother, even though she's not living in the same house. And I found this so often. I myself, as I say, when I was much younger, if there was something painful or something that I couldn't cope with, it was my mother that I thought of first. Because she was my confidant, she was my best friend, and I could share just about everything with her. But let me talk about Mavish a little. I think she has to stop hiding her light under a bushel, and she needs to get out there, because she's one fine poet, and there's another one who's also doing the same thing, unfortunately. It's a man, a very, very old friend of mine, and I'm trying to arm twist these two to publish anthologies. I mean, Mavish, did you ever do math at school?
Math. I'm very interested
Maths,
in math, though. I mean,
mathematics.
in science and physics, and I did do maths for a very short period, but physics really interests me for some odd reason. Okay,
Lovely, because this is something I found in common between you and this gentleman that I'm talking about. There's a kind of scientific paring away of just about everything, and just the core is left. You know, it's almost like this particular point that you've added to the anthology. I think it's absolutely superb. I'm sorry, ladies. I'm talking about Mavish's work because I've read hers and I haven't had time to.
No, it's all right.
But Sana,
thank you so much.
I would love to do a review, even though I'm a contributor. I'd love to do a review of the anthology itself. And
Please
I
do that.
urge all of you to start
that would be
thinking about
amazing.
a platform for women writers. I think you should pick it up seriously.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very, very
Perfect
much.
person.
Very kind.
I've heard her speak at literary festivals, and I've always admired and respected her intelligence and her, I think the way she looks at things is very unusual. And I think that she really would be a wonderful team member for something like that if Liberty Books is interested in launching something like that.
That's lovely. That's lovely. Very, very, very kind. Miss Nivi, do you have your book, the copy of The Stained Glass Window with you anywhere? Do you have it near you?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
It's in my library and I'm not there right now.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I was just hoping that if we had time, maybe we could just have a short reading of it, but that's good. Thank you very much. I'll just move on to Ifat, if you'd allow me. Thank you so much for being here. I'll just come to the questions. Thank you very much. So, Ifat, hi. Hi, Ifat, how are you? Joining us?
I'm fine. Am I clear enough for all of you?
Yes, you are. I'd like the other participants to please.
I can sit back and relax.
All right. I'm going to read a very brief bio of Ifat Saeed. She's an academic who has taught English literature in all its forms at the graduate and postgraduate levels in Lahore. Translation from Urdu to English is her favorite preoccupation. She has been associated with the Academy of Letters, whose journals have featured several of Ifat's works of translation from classical and contemporary Urdu literature. Her book, Three Contemporary Artists, features translations and original poems in Urdu by Yasmin Hamid and Rizwan Akhtar, as well as miniature artwork by Hira Khan. So Ifat, tell us about your journey through the pandemic and the lockdowns. How's it been as a writer, as a reader, as an academic? What have you been up to?
Before I come to myself, I feel like a pygmy in the presence of Miss Naveed Shehzad. But having moved in the same world of words and literature, I found a lot of commonality in what she spoke of. And of course, what comes most naturally to one is your own indigenous language and culture. But I realized very late in life that what is important for me is being familiar with my own literature. The literatures in English around the world have definitely contributed to my word power, to the broadening of my perspective. It helped me as a teacher, as a communicator. But definitely there's an inadequacy, a vacuum that I hope to fill in if I continue meeting all of you luminaries. And as far as the COVID epidemic is concerned, it, if apart from being, insulated from the rest of the world in terms of physical contact, which is what really is important for me, I lost some wonderful people. But this was before I had submitted the story that you asked for. And I lost my healer, actually, a very famous doctor here. And my last meeting with him, I can still recall, the tender look in his eyes when we spoke of a patient who's very dear to both of us. So, I mean, I don't want to sadden you all, but nevertheless, this time of this, this respite from the busy world and being thrown, onto your own self for most of the time, it did give me a lot of time to think and, sort of kind of eliminate, the bad memories and multiply and sort of fall back on the pleasant times that I had as a child, my trips to our ancestral village, which have sadly discontinued. And during these days of COVID, what I missed most was my ancestral home in the village, actually. So and I know that there's this actually there is this urge in me to go and live there for a few days and get connected with people who befriended me when I was newly married. I married incidentally very young into a large family of boys, and the kind of a feudal set. I wouldn't like to call it feudal, but the kind of landed or what I mean. I don't know how really to put it because
That's fine.
uh, you know the house was always a hub of all kind of activities in the sense of coming, going, and what I missed most and most about that life is the frugal meal times. But anyone who was in the vicinity would be literally dragged to join us all to partake of the meal. And that is something that I recall very strongly. And when you asked me to do this story, I was a little reluctant about it because I as such I've never published anything of my own except for a few projects that I needed to undertake in terms of my academic career.
Yeah.
I've written for conferences and I've written research papers, but fiction has always been a part of my life because I believe in role playing. If I hadn't been into academics, well, I would have been another kind of a performer. And that I might sometime in my life, if I might even get a chance. I mean, I would really love to jump at the opportunity to perform before an audience. I don't know, there is this instinct within me, to have an audience and spectators. We actually, well, I'm old enough to, anybody could qualify my statement, but I actually grew up on that wonderful TV program, where Mrs. Shahzad made her appearance. Yeah, yes. One of my pleasant memories, childhood memories. Childhood, no, why would I call that? adolescent and even beyond that.
Yes, excellent, excellent. I'm glad that you touched on the themes
I
of
really don't mind being the eldest in this panel. In fact, you know, my age gives me a lot of advantages, I'm discovering.
Exactly, exactly.
So
That's what
I
I say
very
to my
easy
children.
with
Yes, of course, of course. It's made you
All
richer
right.
in more than one way.
Well, thank you very much, Ifat and Nivi. I'm glad that you took us through the process, Ifat, and mentioned death and loss, as well as retrospect, which is something that all of us have experienced or observed from a distance, maybe, or from close. So tell me about your fiction writing. I've read your poetry. You sent me your poems sometimes. And I'm very glad and I'm very happy and honored to read your poems frequently. But what I would really like to know is that you say that fiction is part of your life. Do you write short stories or fiction or,
Uh,
flash fiction?
Sana, fiction is a part of my life because I read a lot, and I have been into fiction, teaching fiction, looking into fiction with my students, and then there are times there are things that can only be made clearer through words, and these, because these words, like I remember reading somewhere, I think probably it was Pamuk, who said that, like, words somehow are like insects. They somehow creep inside, the nooks and corners that you've hidden from others. So I mean, when you write, the words that take a form, that structure into a story, they remind of me of Mavish's poem, where she talks of, these experiences being like, the spine of bones. So these words and these experiences, they are actually the spine, of the spinal cord that has put the body together in one piece.
All right. Okay, so before I ask you to read something, do you have the book with you right now, Ifat?
Yes, Anna, I did,
All right.
although it was taking the rounds around the
Yeah,
house.
it's okay.
But yes.
That's okay. But before I ask you to read a small passage from the book, I just ask you to please take us through the process of writing the story, what it meant to you, and what made you write it. I mean, I'm very
Sana,
thankful that when I asked you,
Sana,
you committed.
you made me write it, actually, because I was already working on a longer project. So, but when you asked me to write it down for you, I thought for a second that I must not let Sana down. And then when you
Oh,
gave me a deadline, first I forgot about it. Then probably after 3 weeks, I thought of you. I called you, and you said yes, miss, before the 13th. And then I thought to myself, we always set such stringent deadlines for our students. We've been doing that all our life. So I thought, I'll put myself in my students' place. So I met the deadline, and I'm glad it made it to this wonderful anthology, where I mean, I feel privileged, I feel honored to be, a part of such talent.
amazing. Thank you very much. I'm very, very happy to have your
Thank
story
you,
in here. It's a
Sana.
wonderful story. Reads like a
Thank you,
kissa,
Sana.
and it's beautiful. Thank you very much. Would you like to read a few lines from the story just
Sana, I
for
like, all right, if you say so. um, it's
just a
it's
few
the second it's
far
the
away?
it's the second paragraph. Everyone in the small village that lay in close proximity to Sahiwal, one of the most fertile regions of our country, believed that eons ago a dervish filtered the finest mud and clay through a sieve and dispersed it all over the once arid soil to turn it into a bedrock of fertility and fecundity. The residue in the sea was deposited in a heap a short distance away from the pond, the bathing area for people and cattle alike. Over the years, the heap hardened into a boulder. Thorny cacti and wild bushes sprouted and flourished around it in response to the earth's desire for fertility and fecundity. The boulder became a much frequented spot for many a secret rendezvous.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. It's been wonderful, wonderful being here on this platform.
I think we have Nivi's approval too, do we? I just saw her nod.
Absolutely.
Oh, great.
Honored.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so much. I'd like to move on to Ilona. Ilona, could you unmute yourself and the rest please mute? Thank you very much. Hi, Ilona. Thank you very much for being here. I'd like the other participants to please mute their mics so that I can listen to Ilona in a better way, please. Thank you very much. All right. Ilona Yusuf, introduction, but I'm going to read it nonetheless. Ilona Yusuf is Associate Editor of the Aleph Review. She has freelanced for Nukta, Newsline, and Art Now over the past 2 decades and has written essays on Pakistani poetry in English for publications, locally and abroad. Her poems have been published once in book form and thereafter in Pakistani and international literary journals, in print and online. She worked as an editor for the Alhambra Literary Review in the early 2000s and guest edited a special issue of Pakistani poetry in English for the Canadian poetry magazine Vellum in 2012. As a printmaker, she integrates word and image in the form of artists' books, lighting design, and conversation piece furniture, ahamichea. Ilona, you need to unmute yourself, please. Yeah, you unmute. Yeah, so wonderful, wonderful. Tell us about your activities through the pandemic. Since you're, you do a lot of things. You have art on your hand. There's this associate editor job that you do for the Aleph Review, and of course you write flash fiction and poetry. So take us through the journey. How's the pandemic and lockdown been for you?
It's been a little busier than I thought. Well, not the first 3 months, which were rather bad because that was complete lockdown. And I think everybody was a little shell-shocked in general, right? But we got through it. And I know that Mevish was like constantly really motivated for the next issue of the review. So that kept us very busy. And because we'd started the website, then things were going on. As far as my design work is concerned, that kind of like gained more momentum after August, and that's keeping me rather busy at the moment. As far as writing is concerned, I've been very sporadic for rather a long time. I write occasionally rather than regularly, which is not the right thing to do.
Oh, okay, so this flash fiction bit that you wrote, you called it a vignette, I remember. How was it? What made you write that? Yeah.
The thing is that I think you're responsible for my writing fiction at all, because normally I write only poetry or I write essays, and essays have usually been about poetry or about poets, right? Flash fiction, like I'd been thinking about it for a long time. Yeah, I guess I had written one vignette before this, and that was also incidentally about a beggar. And beggars always interest me because, wherever you stop at any traffic light, there's always beggars and they all have their own characters. But what struck me during the pandemic was a kind of, in case it was the despondency between what was before and what was now. And in this case, it's about a transgender person, right? But I had this image in my mind because, and this is exactly what happened. I mean, it's not even fiction really. It's just, it actually happened, right? So it's just a description of that. But it kind of came together somehow, although, again, like if I was very much behind the deadline and the image was there in my mind, and I remember we had, as it happens in the narrative, we had gone out, and my husband and I saw this person, and the contrast between last year and now was so kind of like glaring, it was strange. But the other thing that really struck me during this time has been the kind of, I know that you can be a beggar for different reasons. You can be a beggar because you're really poor. You can be a beggar because you're part of the beggar mafia. But this beggar mafia in this time, because I keep looking at beggars, and it's had an edge of cruelty. So recently, well, probably from July onwards, I've noticed a lot of really, really old people being parked, in some spot where obviously it's considered that they will be catered to, right? Or they will earn some money. And I've actually seen one of these people being put back in the car once the day is over. So it has a really cruel edge to it as well. But anyway, that's not the point of this particular piece, which I wrote. I don't know whether I should say any more. But...
No, actually, I really, I was very happy to have this bit of flash fiction, Ilona, because this is also an interesting story. When I reached out to you and I asked for something, for you to submit to the anthology, what I thought was that you would submit something more poetic. Maybe you'd write a poem for us, and that is something that you also mentioned, that I might write a poem. So, but then this thing came out, this flash fiction bit, and I was very happy because, first of all, it's about a hijra, yeah? That's the protagonist, and a very jolly one at that, I must say. Usually that's what their personality is like, and he's very cheerful. She's very cheerful. Yeah, she's very cheerful, and she's, since she's representative of those people, I think, who are just looked at but not really seen by most of us. And although they are there, they become part of the scene for us, and we do not really choose to tell their story. So I'm very, very glad that you picked a hijra and told her story to us. It was great. I'd like to hear from you, Ilona. How does your art work mesh with your writing? Is there a connection?
I think there is. I've always been fascinated by color and landscape. I write very often about people as well, but I also write a lot about nature. And I think the visual and the text are very much connected. Maybe the visual comes first, or they come together. I'm not sure, really. I think they come together. But what comes naturally to me is actually poetry. So I will see something, and then the words come themselves in a way. But I'm not trained at all, and I think the only thing that I think what taught me poetry was music, because my mother was very interested in music, both my parents actually. And I grew up with a lot of classical music, both Western and Eastern. But in the case of Western, my mother would actually make me beat out the time. So if we were listening to music, she would make me work out the time sequences. I don't even think I knew exactly what I was doing. All I knew was that I was beating out the time with my fingers. And I think that really, I do think that has some bearing on the way I write, because I'm constantly thinking of the rhythm or the music, and I hear the music when I read poetry. I mean, not just my own, but other poetry as well. I think it's very closely linked.
Well, that's beautiful. So beautiful to be able to listen to music while you're reading poetry. I've never really heard that before. That's amazing. All right. Ilona, do you have the book with you? I hope you do.
I do, actually.
Yes, please read a few lines for us. And I must say, this story is right in the middle. In case someone did not notice, it was very intentional. We received it towards the end of the submission, and we were very, very particular about this, that this should be right in the middle of the book. It's the separator. So let's hear it from you, Ilona.
Okay. All right. So I'll read from the middle. The piece is called Pandemic. And it's really, I think, about the way it's affected people in different ways. So stifled by the constriction of their four walls, the couple had ventured out, driving through the empty streets on this balmy night at the onset of summer. Presently, they were parked in the square next to the pharmacies, the only shops open at this late hour. A darkness dotted sparsely with the shadowy shapes of figures and a few cars. Peering into the dimness, focusing on the details of each form, they pieced together the tentative overtures of skinny youths holding out fans of coloring books, waved hurriedly away by wary masked shoppers. And then I'll go ahead, and on the step leading to the benches in front of them, the tiered mass of a masked figure in a dotted shalwar kameez, head bowed, elbows resting on knees spread wide, hands hanging loose between them. I think I've left a lot out, but I think that's enough.
Oh, yes, thank you very much. We just want to just give small tidbits from the writing. We don't really want to give a lot away. So we have our first comment here. I'm going to start reading the comments and questions. We have Omar Iftikhar saying, what a wonderful assemblage of literati. Great job, Liberty Books. Well, thank you very much, Omar. How very supportive. Can I have another question, please, so that I can ask them to... Okay, we have Muniba Samad, and she's asking, there are 26 stories from different writers. Which one is your favorite and why? Okay, I think this is I'm supposed to ask this question to all of you, but I'm sure all of you have already told me you have not really read the whole book. Do we have anything to mention? Any of you? Any story that you've read? Yeah, I know.
Sorry?
I know. Yeah, we got the books late in Lahore, so I think we have not really been able to read all the stories. I could tell you my favorites, but I already have in different sessions. I'm just going to skip this one. We've all been talking about, the whole book. I'm very grateful. I'm sure Vivi is very kind. She said she'll be very happy to review the book, and I'm elated to hear that. Maybe we can hear her comments then. Can I have the next question, please? Oh, there's Taha, and he says, thrilled to see all of you here. Thank you, Taha. Another one, please. I have another question.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Kamal Malik, I suppose. She says, please mention the name of the book Nivi ma'am was telling about. All right, Nivi, could you please tell us about the books you mentioned?
Oh, I suppose that means my book, which is, it's called Aslan's Roar, which in Turkish is, Aslan means lion. So the lion's roar, and then the byline says, Turkish television and the rise of the Muslim hero. I think very briefly, I'll tell you, because I'm an actor myself, actor, director, I also write. I grew up on an enormous feast of film and television from what we call Hollywood, because I discovered the Far East much later, and there's some wonderful work coming out of there. I just happened to stumble onto Turkish television, and what I found there, and I'm not talking about Ertugrul, which seems to be the flavor of the month in Pakistan or the flavor of the year, for all the wrong reasons, I have to assert. The important thing I noticed was how badly the colored man and the Muslim had been treated by all the narratives coming out of Hollywood and the West. Initially, it used to be the Nazi that used to bear the brunt of their anger, and then it slowly, very, very surreptitiously shifted towards the Middle East. The black man had always been there, but what was happening is to tar the two with the same brush. When I started to look at Egyptian television and Brazilian television, and then finally I landed in Turkey, I found something extraordinary happening. These were stories that were being told by societies in transition. And by that, I mean particularly in Muslim societies, where we've always had a problem between tradition, which means religion, and modernity, which means being liberal. This tug of war, the Turks seem to have come to grips with very early on, because their television dates back to the 70s. And this was state television, mind you, which started the whole thing going, unlike Pakistan. So I've drawn a very important comparison between what state television does in Pakistan and what it does in places like Turkey, despite all the reservations that we have about liberalism being clamped down upon in Turkey itself. I discovered that the Muslim hero was non-existent as far as Western television was concerned, or Western cinema was concerned. He was perhaps at best, he would be a sidekick, which I found extraordinarily in a film about Robin Hood, where his best friend is a Muslim, a colored Muslim. It was a great eye-opener for me. I was prompted by my discoveries, and I saw something like 200 Turkish television series, and I almost went cross-eyed looking at them over a period of 2 years. The Muslim hero has its own Rambos, setting the world right without the white man. And the white man's burden, which has been there as a throwback to, I think, the colonial era, where people of color or nations that were far away from the motherland were under duress, made to follow a certain standard of culture and education and so on, which the white man thought was the best thing to do. We are now in a post-colonial era, and these people, these nations are fighting back and reclaiming what are very old traditional societies, which we can learn so much from. So my book mainly deals with that, and also with finding a middle between tradition and orthodoxy, and the irresistible reach of modernity and what it can promise you. Because this is a problem with our youthful populations. In Muslim countries, perhaps have the greatest number of young people who are caught in the middle of this terrible mesh, and they don't know what to do with themselves. So that was my dilemma.
Lovely. Wonderful. Thank you very much. We have another question from Omar. How difficult was it for our esteemed writers to pen down their emotions related to the pandemic in a book about the pandemic during a time when the unpredictability of the future was overpowering all of us? All right, I'd like Ifat to go first, please. Could you? Do I need to repeat the question?
I can read it, Sana, but what made us, it is the power of words again, I would say that, because art in whatever form it turns catastrophes into works of art, and the more deeply you are touched by the external environment, I think the more you draw upon your own inner resources to sustain yourself and your and the people around you who depend on you a lot. So
Great, thank you.
wasn't okay.
Yeah, please go ahead. Sorry, I thought you're done. Please go ahead.
That's okay. I think that's okay.
All right, Mavish, you want to add something to this? Was it difficult to write about the pandemic during the pandemic?
Apart from that brief moment of that made me write the poem in your book, I kind of, I'm a fatalist. I just feel that, I mean, what will happen, and no point worrying about it. And just use whatever one has to, I mean, out of experiences like this, you draw, you get words as if it said, and you know, so many pestilences and plagues in the past have been written about. I think of Decameron by Boccaccio. I think of La Peste by Camus. So, as writers, I think all we can do is carry on writing and leave the rest to whatever force is there, which is looking after us all. So that's what I feel.
Thank you very much, Ilona. Was it difficult for you to write during the pandemic, especially about the pandemic?
No, actually, I just did that little I guess. And again, it was the way people react to things. And really, you know, the initial lockdown was very severe. So the way people reacted to it, that's what interested me. It was really isolating in the beginning. And I think everybody didn't quite know how to react to it. And of course, for people like transgenders or for beggars in general, it's their livelihood which was at stake. Everybody's livelihood is at stake at this point. It's a hard time economically, but for people who are beggars, then, you know, nobody coming out is a big downside. I mean, how do you earn then? And especially for transgenders who have a kind of fragile place in society anyway.
Thank you. Nivi, would you like to add something to this? Was it difficult writing about the pandemic during the pandemic? Was the unpredictability of the future affect anything?
Absolutely not. I mean, when you asked me, I wrote.
Yeah.
I think stories, fiction, poems, they write themselves.
Yeah.
I think, like Ilona said, you know, somehow or the other, it's sort of the rhythm comes to you and the words flow out. And like Ifat said, it's all about the language finding its own dynamic. I think that's what happens. You wouldn't really ask. I know Ifat is absolutely right when she says when there are difficult times or when there's a challenge, then art or literature or whatever produces wonderful stuff. And you can look at it historically, and that's absolutely correct. However, I think it doesn't need a pandemic for you to be able to write. It can be anything. It can be a personal issue. It can be an avalanche of feelings. Anything can trigger it off. It's very difficult to say what impels you to write and whether you find it difficult. I think all writing is difficult at all times because it sort of runs away with itself and it has a mind of its own and you have to rein it in and you so there's always a tussle. I think it's a very difficult process, like for an artist, a painter, or for an actor to try and create a character. All good work is difficult, and it should be.
Great. Thank you very much. That's very insightful. Do we have another question, please? All right. There's one from Shiroz Mahmood. He says, thoroughly enjoyed your piece of writing in the book. Do you plan on writing any book in future? Okay, so it's a very, very nice question, but he's not really mentioned who's he's asking this question to, so I'm going to put this to all of you. Let's start with Mevish again. Mevish, can I have the question back, please? Do you plan on writing any book in the future, Mevish? You're so lucky you have Nivi twisting your arm, she said, for the future book, but mention it again once again. What's the upcoming book? Yeah.
I'm getting a bit of breakage here, but if that question is aimed at me, I am so happy that you know, Nivi has twisted my arm a bit, and I've been actively putting my points together and I want to go across to her and show them to her. And I think I need somebody on my head with a cane. So I'm definitely planning a book of poems, and thanks to Nivi for that.
Excellent. Ifat, what are you planning next? We already know about your first book of translation and poetry. What are you planning next? You have to unmute yourself, please.
Okay.
Yes, yes. So what are you planning? Tell us about your ventures.
I am writing, Sana, but I recently read Words by Sartre, and so I'm a little superstitious about it because the first and manuscript he wrote, he showed it to a friend, and it never saw the light of day.
Oh.
So I'm just keeping a little mum about it.
Oh, okay. Okay. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Ilona, let's hear it from you. What are you planning next?
Well, I have 2 essays which are due very soon. I'm writing about poetry after quite a while, but I have to write about Hema Raza, who I think was instrumental in taking poetry in a different direction from the late 90s. So I started working on that. Please excuse the howling in the distance. That's my cat, and it's most unpleasant. You can hear it. Please ignore it and bear with me. So I'm writing about him, and I'm also writing about Shadab Zist Hashmi, who I've written about in the past also, and who she has become she specializes in writing ghazal in English. So, and she's actually written also a collection of essays about the ghazal in English called Ghazal Cosmopolitan. And she's also, she's just had a book published called Comb, which is a memoir about her life, about her growing up in Peshawar. So I'm writing those 2 essays, which are commissioned essays. As far as my own writing is concerned, it always, I'm a person who doesn't write enough, who has lots of poetry amassed somewhere and doesn't really fine-tune it enough. So that's what I need to start doing. And I hope I get around to doing it in the next year. That's one of my resolutions, and I don't believe in making resolutions usually, but yeah, I think I need to do that.
Okay. We can go back to Nivi. Nivi, would you like to add something to this? What are you doing for the future?
Well, my dear, I just finished writing a television serial. It's for a Pakistani, I don't know, network, if they pick it up. I finished a Turkish, English, Urdu, trilingual film, and it's gone to Turkey for selection. So, but I'm halfway through my memoir, which I call Life Swings Under the Mango Tree. So I've been busy.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here, and those who have been watching and listening to these amazing, amazing ladies. I had a great time. I hope you all did too. So I think it's time to say bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.